Hi, Governor. Good morning. A question I just had for you is, I'm sure you'd agree, since this past election, that the country has somehow gotten more divisive than ever before. And what do you plan to do if you were with the nomination in the presidency to fully unite the country in a bipartisan manner? And what would you specifically do? Any proposals that you would put forward to try to unite the country with having to pass 60 votes in the Senate?
All right. Another great question. I've done some town halls. This is the first larger scale town hall I've had in a collegiate, university setting. You guys are good. So that's the essence. When I say it's essential to beat Donald Trump, but it's not sufficient. That's the question: is how do you get from here to there? And again, one of the things I think is unique in my background, that I look at what we've achieved in Colorado, and in almost every case it's because we were able to sit down with people that had been feuding and at each other's throats, and we were able to get them to put down their weapons. So one example would be the fugitive emissions. Right? I've got a master's in earth and environmental science. When they first came to me and said, "What are you going to do about fugitive emissions?" I went, "Fugitive who?" But fugitive emissions refers to all the methane and various escaping gases from our industrial world, and most powerfully methane. Methane is anywhere from 40 to 60 times more destructive to our climate than CO2, and yet frequently it's never even discussed. A guy named Fred Krupp, who runs the Environmental Defense Fund, came to me and said, "What are you going to do about fugitive emissions?" And right after I got elected governor, and once he explained to me the scale and ramifications of what is involved, I said, "All right, we'll take this on." But obviously the oil and gas industry, Colorado's, I think, in the 5th or 6th or 7th largest producer of oil and gas in the country. And the oil and gas industry wasn't exactly excited about this notion that we were going to take on fugitive emissions. But we got the oil and gas industry representatives and the environmental community to actually come together and sit in the same room. And let me tell you, they hate each other. They feel they've been betrayed by the other side, they've been stabbed in the back frequently. And that process of betrayal makes it very hard for them to trust each other. And we got them in the room, and we spent the first 2 months just talking about what does the scientific literature actually mean, and got them to listen to each other. And that's the one thing I learned in the restaurant business, is how to listen. And when you're trying to persuade someone to think about a difficult issue in a different way, actually listening to them and making sure they understand they're heard is incredibly powerful. In the restaurant business, you learn if somebody gets soup on their lap and they're really angry, you use their exact words back to them, right? And there's something very powerful about using a person's words when they're angry and repeating them back to them so that they feel heard. And you, by using the words, you actually become a little bit different as well. And we did this with the environmental community and the oil and gas industry. We would, for those first 2 months, as we negotiated, what did the scientific research really say? Because the way I talked the oil and gas industry into committing to this process, and they were very, one of the CEOs said to me, "Well, why would we do that? Why would we commit to a process of looking at fugitive emissions if we know that those environmentalists are going to create a bunch of red tape and we'll spend money that won't do any good and we won't get any credit anyway?" And so that was part of our agreement. Was I got the oil and gas industry to sit down by getting the environmental community to agree, no red tape, make it lean and efficient, and make sure that we share credit. And that process allowed us to go through all the scientific literature, figure out what was really needed to be done, and then to actually create methane regulations. So our methane regulations, the oil and gas industry ended up agreeing to spend $60 million that first year, and it's the equivalent of removing 320,000 automobiles a year from our roads. Right? And no one else has done this. Our methane regulations are now being rolled out as national policy in Canada. We're hopeful they'll be rolled out as national policy in Mexico next year. They need to be rolled out as national policy everywhere. Everywhere in this country, everywhere in the world. They're not I mean, it was $60 million the first year. I think they're down now to $25 million a year is what they're spending for this amazing improvement in air quality. I think that's the process of what we have to do to address all these major challenges is put in the time, instead of blaming each other and trying to figure out who's the winner and the loser, really get down back to hearing what each other are really saying. Because most times it's not, the things that divide us are not exactly what we think the other side is demanding. In many cases we have a better, we're much closer together than what we see. And there is no other, there's just no magic way to do this without putting in the hard time and really listening to people. I've never persuaded anybody to change their mind about anything by telling them why they're wrong and why I'm right. The only way people ever change their mind is by feeling like they're heard and then actually having a discussion about, you know, what are all the variety of the different possibilities.